I've heard some statements being made, and many people, many black people, were disappointed in the result of the Texas special election, the primary between Representative Jasmine Crockett and I believe the state legislator uh, John, whatever it was, Talarico. And the reaction of it was quite incendiary, with black people saying that they'll never vote for someone like that. They'll never vote for the person in the. Well, then, was this because you didn't get your candidate of what was of what was spoken? Uh, why not? And then it turns into the Latinos, and the Latinos essentially were pretty upset with Jasmine Crockett by a statement that was made. So it wasn't just that she was black and she's a woman. That may have been, but the reason why they didn't vote for her was, and again, I can see what she was trying to say, but it also gives us a lesson in what to say and why. We must be, as what they say in the Bible, must be as harmless as doves, but wise as serpents. And so a lot of people didn't vote for Representative Crockett because she said she was saying things that were attributed to, well, like, we don't pick cotton anymore. We don't do this anymore. That's what the Latinos do. Well, of course, that made the Latinos very upset, very mad. Now, I know she didn't mean it that way. I know she didn't. But enough forces are there to try to separate people so that another agenda can go forth that essentially that it's been set in motion. So that means that another instance of black people voting for their own interests, Latinos black are voting for their own interests, and so on. So the thing is, though, not to belittle what was done, but to understand the context of it and to not allow racism to get in the picture. Understand, saints of God, that as much as America is home of the free, land of the free, home of the brave, and all that, and for the most part, I think it is, but it's also a land of injustice. Not saying every judge and every police officer, I'm not saying every representative, I'm not saying every elected official, I'm not saying at any that any government officer or whatever is uh, they essentially peddle in injustice. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there is enough that it bears watching, and people sometimes bring their own ideas into a situation. They they actually, it's almost like they set a fuse in the middle of a crowd, and um, they watch the bomb go off and look at the casualties and clap because they have destroyed their resistance. And what I want people to do is, before you begin thinking about voting for so and so and doing so and so, is to think about, is my mind really free from prejudicial thoughts? Is it really free? And all races should be thinking about that. I'm not even talking about white right now. I'm not. I'm talking about the prejudices that exist in those that are considered minorities. Because I do remember many of our people, and this is not here to just expose our dirty laundry. No, I'm not here to expose dirty laundry, but I'm here to say, take a look at yourself. And before you accuse others of racism, what racism do you have that may cause somebody to be regarded differently? Well, it doesn't. But we don't have the power. You have enough power to influence somebody. As long as you have the power to influence somebody, your racism can potentially hurt somebody. Maybe not as much as the majority people who have, of course, the backing of government, backing of industry, and so on. So do I think there's systemic racism? Yes. Do I believe that there is such a thing as societal racism? Yes. I don't believe that many people try to be racist. I believe they feel like, well, I don't have a racist bone in my body. You probably don't. But then you see the injustice being done and you don't question why. That's where you have to get into. But let's take Jasmine Crockett's statement about Mexicans or the Latinos. I think her main thing was that essentially, remember with farming, black people have always been tied to farming in a way that either we were slaves or sharecroppers. That had always been the case. Now there are a few, not many, probably very few in terms of the total amount of black people in this country. But there are a few happen to be farmers. But they're farmers because they want to be farmers. They're farmers because they want to be able to till the soil. They want to be able to raise cattle, livestock, whatever it happens to be. They want to do this stuff. And if they want to do it, essentially, then they are able to work. Now that's where it looks okay, because you own the land, you own the property, you own the rights to the seed, and you own the equipment, or you're at least leasing the equipment, and you're putting down the fertilizer and all those type of things. It is for your wealth. That's okay. And then even if you say, okay, really, I don't want to do this, but I'd rather work for someone in the fields. Now, you can do that, but there's been a big stigma placed there over years and years of people either being enslaved or they being, they call them sharecroppers. They could never buy out their land because everything that they had was rented to the person that owns the property. And so they have to keep working and working on that land. And working on that land. It was a never-ending cycle that would go through generations. Europeans may recall this as serfs. That they would be on a piece of land and it was owned by the knights and the barons and, and all the upper class nobility. And they keep farming and farming, and they give their produce to, the nobleman, whether it's the knight or whatever. So we know that this is something that had happened before. Never said it was right, but it was something that it was done. Now, in our case, essentially it was actually a symbol for us of being put down. So the more people that fled from sharecropping, the more people began to turn against sharecropping and not being held to that. Of course, there are many people who would love for that same thing to be reenacted once again. But there's so much negativity towards it that you won't see very many black people go back there. That's what Jasmine Crockett was talking about. She wasn't necessarily trying to make it so that essentially it meant that this is what was actually fit for Latinos to do. However, just even if you don't mean to do that, that's why we have to watch our words to others. And we're the ones that have to take responsibility for those words being taken whatever way it is. This is why we have to make sure our communication is straight. Because it's so easy to twist it in a way that maybe you didn't know, but at the same time, you had to understand that was not going to come out right. And here's the long and short of this. On farms, most Latinos do not own their farms. They work on farms. They're the backbone of the agricultural industry in the United States. Because you have these huge farms. Go out in the Central Valley of California. See all of those farms. These are not family farms that husband Mike and wife Alice and the 3 kids go out there and they farm it. It's too big. So what do? They try to get people that are willing to work for a particular wage, and then they have them come in and they tend the farms, they harvest the crops, and they plant the crops and so on. But they've been mistreated too. They've been mistreated. And in fact, essentially the whole reason for Cesar Chavez Day, which I definitely agreed with until it was found out what he did with young girls. So it almost seems like we have to make sure that everybody is not dealing in young girls. It doesn't have to be a certain race. Everybody does it. Everybody does it. We just have to take it out as a thing against humanity. Not something that white people do, something that black people do, something that Latinos do, something that Asians do. Everybody. Everybody says, but for the grace of God, so go I. If the grace of God wasn't in us, we'd end up doing the same old thing. But going back to the comment about Latinos being on farms. What we have to do is be able to show appreciation for that. Now, will come a time where Latinos may not want to be on farms. In fact, that time has come. They want to make their own business, want to do their own things. Now, if they come in the right way, are they going to be trapped? And even those that here's the thing, even if they don't always come in the right way, are they working towards making sure their paperwork is done, making sure they are law-abiding citizens, making sure they've done the right way? Essentially, they're not taking anyone else's job. They're not taking black jobs. They're not taking Asian jobs. They're taking jobs wherever they can so they can make a living. You just don't want them there. And now you've thrown this bomb in the middle of it to split the black and Latino vote. And you know that is a simmering problem. Someone knew this was a simmering problem between blacks and Latinos. And yes, I have grown up with essentially on both sides. Black gangs don't like Latino gangs. Latino gangs don't like black gangs. Latino gangs don't want black people moving into their neighborhood. I've heard about that. So I'm not saying it's not true. But then essentially, the reverse is the case too. Black people don't want Latinos moving into their neighborhood. And they do things against them. And all the while, the majority sits back and laughs. Ha 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 ha! You can't even, you guys can't even subsist among yourselves. So while we're fighting, they're taking advantage of it. Because they know that we're going to feel angry. Oh, our people are messed up. Okay. But would you rather them go with a person who really does not care about them at all versus someone who at least pays lip service to caring about others? And also, we should be careful in how we say things. Like there's certain things that we as blacks used to call Latinos and call Asians. It wasn't right. It wasn't right then. It's not right now. But I also remember in the Natasha Harlan days that essentially I experienced it. Korean grocers, because they essentially, many of them had some money. They were doctors, they were lawyers in their own neighborhood, but they couldn't get that way here because the way was blocked. It was essentially, what do you call it? It was discrimination against them. So what did they do? They scraped up whatever money they did, and they bought stores. They bought grocery stores. They bought these things. But then people kept telling, watch out for the black people. They'll steal you blind. They'll steal you here. They'll do this. They'll do that. And then you see people looking over you. And they're looking at you. So as you see that, then you know it's true. But the paranoia is so real. And that's what really caused the blow up between Koreans and blacks. The paranoia between the two groups was so real that when a bad thing happened, when something bad happened, then it just blew up around the neighborhood. And that should never have happened. But again, it's against people who were likewise oppressed. And all we're doing is fighting against each other. As saints of God, we can't let these things happen. That is really what I'm trying to say. That as much as we are decrying racism here, we have to look at ourselves. Look at ourselves. Are we having prejudicial thoughts? Are we having thoughts that really are not worthy of God, but are worthy of people being scared that someone might take over? So are we guided by the power of the Holy Spirit, or are we guided by fear? That's what we have to ask ourselves. And I hope your answer is that you have the love of God, which casts away fear. Love you guys. Take care in Jesus' name.